Welcome back to Apocalypse and Genesis. This is the video I promised Emerald Waters, who noticed that the next eclipse, depending on how you view the paths of the previous two, paints a giant Aleph or Tav above the United States of America, a great seal of God, if you will. So do you view this occasion as a mark of great benediction upon a holy people, or the sudden fall of judgment upon Earth's lawless ones? I'm pretty sure we are about to experience both answers to the question. Our ancestors said to expect new lights in the heavens to mark this time, presaging a dramatic pole shift, promising a new heaven and a new earth. The coming changes will be felt the world over, but I feel the greatest will be right here in this country. For 2.5 centuries, the ones playing I've Got a Secret tried to warn us. Look carefully at the great seal on your dollar bill, and you will see a crude staff god at the pillars, a phoenix depicted as an eagle holding two branches, and a first of Aries eclipse at the 14th Bakhtun. Well, the staff god came in 2010, and the 14th Bakhtun began in 2012. So now we await an eclipse at the first of Aries happening in just a few weeks. I wonder if all the famous actors and singers are about to disappear into underground bunkers like the banksters, or whether they might remain in the public eye as a good example for the rest of us. What did Jesus say of the sacrifice to come? Whosoever shall seek to save his life shall lose it, and whosoever shall lose his life shall preserve it. The times will be desperate, forcing people to make evil choices about who lives and who dies in the contest to come. The object for all of us, I think, is to try to leave here with your soul intact rather than play a zero-sum game against everyone else. The penalty for being the last man standing may not be worth it. For example, you can call me a prude, but I don't think I want to live as a cannibal, drinking my own piss when the streams fill with red algae and sewage. And the Antifa mobs from LA will raise the cartels here to the suburbs for the last great tailgate party. 4 times in Revelation, Jesus says, I am the Alpha and the Omega. In Egyptian, these were the heron and the phoenix. Since Jesus spoke in Aramaic, he was saying on behalf of his God of heaven and earth, I am the Aleph and the Tav. Yahweh, too, often spoke for Yahweh one. It takes a man to deliver the words of God, even if he's not the prophet you were expecting. He was saying the creation happens 4 times a precession. The Maya and Aztecs warned us of the cusps of Pisces, Aquarius, Sagittarius, Scorpio, Virgo, Leo, and Gemini, Taurus. The 4 Bacabs, rulers of the world quarters. And the day one of these sun gods died, it restarted the calendar. They named that special day one Imex for one crocodile, and they knew the god slain by Kenaf or Seth would be resurrected in 3 days. In the Bible, the Bacabs were known as archangels, but it's the same lesson. Each headed one of the 4 rams or yuga, and now another is set to die when we see a white horse, and he that sits upon him is called faithful and true, and with him come war and judgment. Last time it happened at Orion. This is just a Native American stone for sale on eBay. I imagine it was a device you might use to spin yarn or rope. But I think it's a great symbol to see how the sky gets turned around. Jupiter and Saturn will reverse. Blue star and red star will reverse. Meanwhile, the sun will exhaust itself with flares, both caused and obscured by an influx of interstellar dust. When the shifts happen on the way to reversal, imagine your ecliptic changing at the same time, because you'll be headed to the opposite hemisphere without buying a plane ticket. I believe there will be two great movements along the way. One of the visiting heavenly objects, I believe the dark blue-green one, the Heron, will obscure the sun and drag the North Pole south. But the tendency, once the coming superflare turns Earth's core and mantle to mush, will be for the poles to spend some time at the equator due to their weight and centrifugal force of the rotation. So ice will melt and the seas rise before the ice age arrives over the next century. It will soon be time to toss your school textbooks on global warming. The Maya said cold will be here by 2040 with the grand solar minimum. Events definitely got going on the eclipse. And mind you, this prophecy is about 26,000 years old. So, it's history. And I might get some of it wrong. But on the top piece, note that there are two eclipses going on. One as we would normally observe, happening with the sun and moon, and one involving objects either from the Nibiru system or Venus and Saturn, as if the ecliptic were to suddenly turn in this direction. The Taino axe from the Caribbean notes the first of Aries, either as a place or a time, beginning the fall of the flood god, whom they remembered as a stylized frog, whereas the Maya saw the coming of a green dragon. For the Maya and Egyptians, the creator could be seen as a hornet or bee, Deuteronomy 7:20 and Joshua 24:12. And in the Dresden Codex, Orion could be a dark vulture high on the tree of life, devouring the life of the corn goddess Sun. Imagine for a moment that you had your Bible spiral bound, and when you read it, you fold back the covers and you see one passage. Well, imagine history like that, with the distant past and the future both eclipsed by the now. Instead of thinking in terms of a linear timeline of 6,500 years of human struggle, what you would have is a cycle where there's precious little difference between the beginning and the end. You would realize the very next thing to follow Armageddon and Apocalypse is the next reading of Genesis. Well, the rise and fall of God's great sword between the blue star and the red is like that. You can see it as a great serpent zodiac periodically slashed by a lioness. You can see it as a heron pouncing on a serpent. You can see it as a red star savior hung upon a cross in the heavens. You can see it as two goats, Aries and Capricorn, trading places 4 times a precession, or as an eagle priest handing over the tribe's sun scepter to the jaguar priest, from whom he received it, to whom he gave it. You see, in the blink of an eye, your perspective changes. The powers that be can move around the matrices of power, promising the world will never be the same. But watch their treason. They move $1 billion here and a carrier group there, maybe to the Baltic Sea, check. Fly Air Force to Israel, check. Debank the populace and initiate New World Order, checkmate. You and I were pawns in the great crimes of empire. The banksters of Babylon were your Anunnaki masters who learned at the feet of the Pleiadians. Across the world, the wise knew what is supposed to happen when the sky falls. There are so many tomes of ancient creation stories, so many scrolls of prophecy, just two different views in the annals of war and cataclysm. The ancients even tried to tell us when it would begin, and my fear is that you've no longer time to prepare. On the little libation bowl in the center, you can see that where the age of Pisces ends on the first of Aries, Orion trades places with the Southern Cross. And that's a pretty specific prediction, like making your celestial globe and your terrestrial globe touch and setting a timer. So now when the poles shift, our entire universe changes. Have you seen Dune 2? The twin moons of Arrakis eclipsing the sun. I believe we could see something similar next month. The image shows up in Greek jewelry and the artifacts of Minoan Crete. It's something they saw when the age of Taurus began. The one who noticed the coming disaster was Jupiter, Zeusamon, the Lamb of God. Urhoron, the old one, was seen in the Americas as the Aries dragon of Ojuelos de Jalisco. Urcuchille, the great Lama of the Inca descending from Vega, our new pole star when the pole shifts. Probably the same as Quetzalcoatl of the Aztec, depicted at Serpent Mound, Ohio. Same as the peacock angel of the Mandeans, who arrived where Apollo placed his lair, then descended to where the gods are gathering now over Cetus. The ancients complained of an associated event at this time they called the conflagration. Maybe it was a micronova of the sun, a Brooklyn current, or a gamma ray burst. Something went off, maybe a nova near Orion or Sirius. Perhaps the effects of a galactic wave. I guess we'll see. It's not as if the conflicting myths are clear on the subject at this point. Two of the big stories of creation involve flood and rapture, both of which, to my mind, are now due. Biblical passages for rapture can be found in 1 Thessalonians 4, Matthew 24, 1 Corinthians 15, and Revelation 3. The Navajo had their own version in the Dine Bahane. At the end of the fourth night, they noticed something white in the east. They saw it in the south. It appeared in the west and in the north, looking like one endless chain of white mountains. They saw it on all sides. It surrounded them and was closing rapidly. There was a great wall of water flowing from all directions. They could not escape. Having nowhere else to go, they took flight. Into the air they soared, higher and higher. Perhaps that is where they got the idea that this America, Atlantis, is Turtle Island, because it submerges from time to time as Ur passes overhead, dragging the ocean beneath him. The sun flared terribly about the time the vernal equinox passed Orion. The Maya have a number of myths referring to two suns of great brightness in the sky. The concern of the supreme God was that the cycle of creation could not be ended with two suns rising out of sync. The larger of them, the visitor, was larger and older and bigger, and the older sun was bad, and he did not let the people rest at night. It was shining constantly, and everything was burnt with people and animals dying from the heat. And one day, both sons decided they would climb the tree of life to gather honey. The big son climbed the tree too high at the insistence of his younger brother. And when the big son arrived at the top, the young son took out his axe and chopped down the tree. In an alternate version of the story, the young son, Hunapu, downed the big guy with a blowgun. Either way, the big sun fell to earth, and then our regular sun stopped flaring and resumed his way. A few questions come to mind from the story. How long do the flares endure? How long does the pole shift last? Is the big one gravitationally locked with the Earth for a few days? Since it tends to oscillate from right to left, is the first movement precessional and the sudden adjustment back to Earth's default on the pole shift? In other words, as planet X passes, do we stay reversed or does Earth roll back to where it was before the passage? There's a Bible passage that seems to come from a related Egyptian story. What people reading their Bible don't realize is that the stories often came from elsewhere. For example, Cyrus the Great, a Persian who said autobiographically that he was inspired by Marduk, was claimed by the rabbis to be an anointed one who spoke to Yahweh. And a Sumerian or Babylonian prophecy from Enki became Yahweh warning Noah. But back to Moses. Manetho and Josephus knew he was an Egyptian priest of Osiris named Osarseph. who assumed a new title as he led the Typhonians of Aries to Israel. And Moses, a name meaning born of a god, may have meant son of Sheth, because Moses seems to be a cognate of Seth. Anyway, connecting the myths of the Hebrews and Egyptians, which is something that scholars would never do, but maybe should. Anyway, you can see on the ancient Israelite stone that when the tree of life falls, the heron has arrived, a comet falls, and the shin, Leo, goes to the southwest. And it spells Aish, meaning fire and man. And the papyrus shows Shu, father of heaven and earth, as the staff god with his place in the south, while he is being supported by one he will exalt and one he will put down. And to me, that all spells the coming of God involving a phoenix rising from the south in some sort of reversal. Unfortunately, the world is populated by priests who don't want to share what they know. So they tell you to tear down the monuments and don't take pictures, and for sure, don't collect old rocks or pottery that might actually mean something. You see, they were the brokers of information between you and the empire, whom they wished to control and impugn. They could and did. Favors or blackmail kept the money in the coffers and confessions sufficient to move the world. Imagine the intel weenies of NSA spouting blood oaths of Masons and Mafia to protect the books of Vatican bankers, papers of the Inquisition, insider trades of the billionaires, and the Epstein video library. But anyway, here you can see that to our ancestors, the great secrets of the universe were pretty much open to any with eyes. And that at the creation, Orion arrives around the time Jupiter flies between Aries and Taurus. And this was important to people on both sides of the ocean. The rock in the middle is Mount Horeb, where Moses struck the rock. And it turns out it was in Saudi Arabia, not Egypt. As I said, this video was inspired by one of our friends who asked if the sign of Jonas might happen directly at the eclipse instead of being at the subsequent gathering of the planets over Cetus the whale. If we get to that second dark moon, remember David Gemmell, and it shows up looking like the blue bird of the Nibiru system, I think Emerald Waters will have been absolutely correct. I believe that the dove, Jonas meant dove after all, will descend somewhere between the first of Aries, where you see that dashed line approaching Venus, and the eclipse itself. And perhaps for once a precession, the date and the place will line up to be the same. If the one who makes our planet roll over is Lucifer and the skies fall, the one to watch is Nibiru Marduk, the son of Enki, Horus the Brave, son of Horon. As Ezra said, watch for a lion messiah to replace the eagle. I'm hugely concerned that we are on the precipice of a religious war unlike any ever seen. For thousands of years, we've heard about a coming apocalypse where this or that group of self-referent zealots is supposed to emerge as masters of the universe, and that group over there is just a bunch of blood-drinking, child-abusing perverts. Just how well do you think that scenario is going to play out? Revelation 20 has Christians losing their heads, and Surah Muhammad verse 4 says basically the same thing. It's like we're running a script written by black-robed aliens from another planet, and they're playing a long, careful game of divide and conquer. We burned bulls for Taurus, lambs for Aries, fish for Pisces, and now we've reached the age of man. Whatever will we butcher for the altars? One of the most interesting objects in the sky right now is Devil Comet 12P. It's flying past the Flaming Sword, past Pegasus, and toward Aries. And it shows up carved in stone and might be that line on the Aish stone between Ur-Choron and his hornet. So you know what? Back in the day, we weren't really advocates for just one constellation or planet or visiting star. The wise always watched for the signs, but their suspicion was that there was a controlling mind behind it all, one whose mind could be known under the influence of this drug or that philosophy or this mantra or that place. And some, given the right upbringing, even presume themselves to be tuned into the divine channel of wisdom. Some of us were known as the Shamsu Hor, the companions of Horus. Some were known as Urshu, the watchers, waiting for judgment and creation, or a way out of this mess. This was just to show that what goes up must come down. Ur-Horon, note his green eyes, can fall just as he can rise. And doesn't Thoth look interesting there as a heron? I don't know if you remember the Ohualan pipe that had Thoth as a condor at the left eye of Pisces, making him the prophet, and Horus the brave over on the right. I suspect that might be backwards from how the Egyptians remembered it. The interesting thing is that ghost of a figure in the middle, the Holy Spirit breathing a super flare in this direction. Here on the left is another view of the great Lama god of the north who ruled the constellations. So he's flying over Pisces with the dragon and dove for eyes, while at the other end of the universe, Pisces is giving birth to a new sun god with the gift of life. The Ramses bust shows a star rising behind the serpent Urius, and the Inanna stele, called the Burney relief, is a magnificent bit of timing. Venus holds the retrogrades of Jupiter and Saturn at the first of Aries between Aquarius, the owl, and Leo for exactly one day next week. I wonder what that's supposed to mean. King Tut's coffin shows Jupiter and Saturn are about to get as mixed up as Jacob's blessing the sons of Joseph. Sounds like a reversal. And the was scepter of Egypt was to compare it to the Ohualan piece. Not sure what animal they were trying to duplicate there with that long head, but it makes me wonder if it was the Seth animal for Aquarius. These are Ohualan pieces from Mexico, but there is Seth, probably about to plant the head of Orion someplace safe, with the knowledge that one day he'll be back. Notice on the Ankh, Seth conquering Osiris has still landed himself in the underworld, while Virgo is shot to the head of the class. And note how in the stars, Orion's shepherd staff ends up in the left hand of Aquarius, just as a Mandean priest would hold his staff as he initiates young Baptists. I believe when the flood comes, we might regard it as holy water, unless you're feeling particularly guilty that day. On the right, you have another view of the Lama scepter. Aside from Urkuchie in the north, the Inca had two more lamas in the heavens. One was his child next to Crux, the Southern Cross, where you will see the red star, and one was his partner at the galactic center. Both were dark clouds of the Milky Way, three places in the heavens to recall the three visitor stars and the great sword of God. The wise used objects you see every day to remember the ones that rarely appear. This was to show that the different nations associate different names or sexes or functions for the objects of their religions, which is why I fear a coming religious war. One tribe's god was another tribe's mother or son. Here's a piece I gave to my favorite translator. It reminds me of something Pablo Picasso once said. Every act of creation is the first an act of destruction. In other words, we won't get back to the Garden of Eden without quite a bit of mayhem. Many will be sacrificed at the hands of the new eon. There's a great Sumerian tablet in which the destroyer, a young shepherd who just made a great mess of things, is handed a plow by the Most High God and told to get back to work. Perhaps coincidentally, Orion was known both as a shepherd and a creator. And notice how that plow looks remarkably like a deer or goat skull. So many references to Aries. In one of the Robin Hood movies, Russell Crowe's version of 2010, there's a memorable stone apropos to our time. The first of Aries has flown to Aquarius, and now balance must be restored in the opposite direction. Meaning, I think that the Aries dragon is to be replaced forcibly by a lion messiah in the coming role. In the very moment that Seth was lighting up the world with the immolation of his right hand man. So it doesn't go particularly well for religions of the old gods when the luminaries are cavorting about in the heavens for all to see, that the scriptures, myths, and legends are laid bare as nothing more than clever metaphors meant to fleece the gullible. The rabbis, priests, and imams spent thousands of years preaching the nobility of their followers, the vices of the unbelievers, the justice of their own parasitism and king-making. Can you imagine the pent-up rage about to be unleashed when the peasants feel literally they have nothing to lose? By sleight of hand, civilization is to be suddenly debanked. Our economy goes to a seventh its size. Laws written to protect you, and let's put that you in air quotes, will be revealed as designed merely to protect JP Morgan, BlackRock, and a handful of the privileged diving into their vaults, having sowed the seeds of war, crime, and poverty. Read Robert David Webb's The Great Taking, or read the protocols by the much maligned Sergei Nilus, who provided us God's 120-year warning in 1903. When I speak to friends and family of all ages, I am struck by the profound mistrust they have in our public institutions, apparently ruled by sociopaths out of all touch with humanity. Looking at the trash, poop, and homeless people piling up on the nation's sidewalks, what mayor, governor, or president in their right mind could tear down borders and import 11 million terrorists, criminals, and parasites? Listening to statistics on poverty, mortality, fertility, crime, the volume of money and education, one gets the distinct impression this slave planet is in deep need of an overhaul, which it's about to get. My hope is that the new heaven and new earth are designed by God and not the usual criminals producing our misery. Before the world goes south, I would encourage you to buy a bit of food and bottled water. Think hard about what you believe to be true, even if all goes mad around you. I've known people who went to hell and back, folks who landed at Normandy, rescued troops in Vietnam, shot down over Iraq, others locked up in POW camps, people who lost absolutely everything in war, hurricane, or fire and had to build their lives anew. And there was one thread that connected all of them. Those who survive have a faith that somehow God will see them through even this crisis, or will be there when the journey is through. In our time before the next challenge, I would also recommend looking at the website ready.gov and start making your plan. The time to think about terrible is not the moment you're in it. Don't wait. Who do you want to be with and where? And get to accumulating the most pressing items that would help your group to survive. Shem will bless you and keep you now and forever. Take care.